There YouTube, Rain here, and I know it's really late, but I just wanted to do this. It was really exciting for me to do the Jeskai and blue one, so I wanted to do this Mardu and white one. This time before looking at the top 5 comments, I'm going to try and guess as well. So, yet again, let's get into it. Ankle Shanker. This card isn't a bomb, so it's not a 4.0, but it just turns on the race. It's probably the best card in the format for it. It can't block your guys. You can hold some guys back to be able to block their guys. So tide boards are ahead. This guy is a bomb, but when you're behind, this card is pretty miserable and mediocre. So I'm going to give it a 3-5, just because of how powerful it is in those situations and how much Mardu wants to be in those situations. Cool, got the 3-5. Yep, Mardu wants to be beat down. Helps with raid. Just going over the review real quick, since I haven't actually looked at this site yet, or this article. Doesn't do much by itself, yep. So you have to have a squad out. And wreck stalemates, yep. Butcher of the Horde, a 5 power flying with this toughness is amazing at 4 mana. Incredible. This helps you play low cost cards and gives you an incentive to play them because they'll be useful to powering this guy up. Lifelink also makes it hard to race this, as well as the Vigilance. 4.0. You barely need, yeah. This would be great as a 4 mana 5/4 flyer already. Chief of the Edge, Chief of the Scale. I'm a little surprised you wrap these into the same card, because I actually would give them different ratings. Chief of the Edge's 2 toughness is just a little rough. It has some synergies with cards like Mardu Charm, but as a body, I think it's a lot weaker than Chief of the Scale's 2/3. Against morph creatures, against 2 power creatures in general, Chief of the Scale just reigns supreme, even if its ability is less powerful. Give Chief of the Edge a 2.75 and Chief of the Scale a 3.0. Though he'd probably, if you lump these in together, I'd say 3.0. Yep. They aren't actually close. Chief of the Scale is pretty much better in every sense. Crackling Doom. Doom. Lightning all over, scattered. I've talked about this card a little. At this sort of cost, I want to be choosing what I remove, even if a good portion of the time in limited, what I want to remove will be the highest power creature. But for instance, Ankle Shanker, it's very hard to hit this with Crackling Doom, if not like impossible. Shocking your opponent isn't really a big deal. I would say this is a 3-5, no, sorry, 3-5 is for great removal. This is a 3-0. This is an upgrade on an Edict effect, but it isn't a big upgrade. It isn't irrelevant, but you know, it's not great. Mardu Ascendancy, a card I've played with and against. I've played against it more often than I've played with it. It's the weakest Ascendancy by a lot, but most of the times it'll make the cut, and for that reason, I will give it a 2-5, but maybe a 2-0. 3-0. It becomes most dead when you're constantly attacking, which is one of the big downsides to this card. Even if Mardu wants to be attacking a lot, this isn't great. It's pretty okay. I'm sticking to my 2-5 for this card though. Mardu charm, the weakest charm, even in limited, simply because 4 damage to target creature should cost 2, not 3 different colors. So it's a little overcosted for this effect, even if it's a great effect. Putting 2 1/1 white warrior tokens and giving them first strike. A lot of the 1 toughness creatures are flyers, so most of the times these 2 will block a morph creature, for instance, and just hope they don't flip it up, or if they can't flip it up. So not an amazing ability, but 2 pretty good abilities, pretty strong. And this third ability might as well not even exist. However, it does, so I'll factor it in. If they have a card that's unbeatable for you and is a non-creature, non-land card, this can check for it and can take a look at your opponent's hand, even if it's filled with creatures. But this effect is a little weaker because you want to pay 1 mana for this. I would say this is between a 3/0 and a 3/5, but simply because it's good removal, I would give it a 3/5. Yeah, that's about the ratio of times you're going to use these abilities. Next is Mardu Rough Rider. When he attacks, target creature can't block this turn. Mardu is a very beatdown sort of deck, so taking out a blocker is very, very good. A 5 mana 5/4 is already efficiently costed in this effect, and aggressive decks is very strong. I would give this a 3/5. It's one of the better Mardu cards to be playing. 2/5. Wow. That's a little low for what I expect this card's power level to be. This is one of the cards that I haven't played with or against, so let's see what he has to say. It's a little weak to spells, okay, not incredibly. A little slow, but that 5 mana is what you want. 5 power prevents a blocker. Okay, if your opponent leaves 2 big creatures back because of this, and you, then this is one time this card could be weak. But if you have a removal spell, as he said, you can supplement that and make really good situations where you kill one of their big blockers and you prevent their other one from blocking, and you just blow them out with a ton of damage. I'm sticking to my 3/5. I'm very impressed with this card. Ponyback Brigade. This is a card, I played 3 of them in my Mardu video, and it was more impressive than I thought it would be. The body's a little weak, but you're getting 5 power for 5 mana, and it's spread across 4 bodies, so it's resilient to removal. I'm going to give this a 3/0. Yep. Ride Down. Fantastic in aggressive decks. It's like a reverse Smite, and Smite's always been great in defensive decks, and so when you're swinging in with this, you just kill big guy, and you get to do damage to them still. So great, efficient removal spell at instant speed. 3/5, but upping on the 3/5 scale. Wow, 2/5. Ooh, that's a very big point that I didn't consider. If you're behind, this isn't going to really do anything. Yeah, it's a very efficient way to blow through huge blockers. And in some decks it's a higher pick rating than the rating would indicate. Yeah, the requirement that you're constantly attacking does actually lower this, but in an aggressive deck I would definitely give it a 3/0 or a 3/5. Other End, 4 mana, deals with any non-land permanent, including Ascensions and Planeswalkers, which Ascensions being rare is going to be a lot more common than Planeswalkers. This is very, very, very solid removal already and has some upside in addition, so this is definitely a 3-5. Yeah, like almost every time you're killing creatures with this. Zurgo Helmsmaster, 5 mana, swings for 7, doesn't get killed when it swings. The weakness of this is its 2 toughness and its vulnerability to removal, which there is a lot of in this format, but he'll definitely get a swing off, so he'll definitely give you value. I would give this a 3-0. It's just vulnerable to so much removal, and it's the tempo in blue especially. Okay, 3-5. Yeah, the first swing is just very, very important. Yeah, I can see this being a 3-5, just because of how powerful it is and how, if they don't have removal, they're just going to lose to this. So yeah, 3-5. Alright, monocolor cards. Abzan Battle Priest. Oh, saw the rating. Dang it. That is the rating I would give this card, though. 4 mana for a 3-power creature. It isn't quite a hill giant, but it is okay already by itself. Outlast is cheap. Something you need to note with Outlast, though, is if you're trying to make this a 4-3 and be able to block with it, it'll be until turn 6 until you can do that. Lifelink is just a nice little upside, especially with the Falconer, which should be next. Flying and lifelink as a combination is really powerful. So this guy's very good at racing too. It's a little worse when you're trying to slow it down, but he isn't even bad in that situation because he has a cheap Outlast. You can read this if you pause it real quick. Abzan Falconer. Jeez. Probably the best Outlast guy that's not a rare. I don't think there are any rare Outlast guys anyway. This guy gives all your creatures with +1/+1 counters flying, has Outlast for only a white, and is a 2/3 for 3, which is already a great body by itself. Outlast it once, it's a 3/4 flyer for what is effectively 4 mana, and with combat tricks you can start just racing them down and getting all your creatures flying. You can do some insane things like giving Zagu Mauler flying. I had in my Abzan video seal pool as a potentially powerful thing to do. You could just give high cost creatures flying, which is insane. 2/3 for 3 is better than a 3/2 for 4. Yep. Much better. Comes at greater risks. What risks does he say? Oh yeah, if they have removal for the Falconer, you could get a little blown out, because the creatures you have with +1/+1 counters that you're counting on having flying suddenly don't have flying and they can start blocking them. But this is very, very, very strong. Anok Bondkin. This should make the top 5 commons for me, unless I go over it, and I had an initial impression that this was going to be better than it is, but 2 mana for a 2/1 is already acceptable. Outlast is a little higher costed than the Falconer and the Battle Priest, but it isn't too ridiculous to pay 2 for this. And giving all your creatures with +1/+1 counters first strike is so powerful. First strike is especially better on defense too, because you block with 2 first strike guys, you kill their bigger creature before they can even get value out of it. It's even fine on the offense, though it's a little weaker for that. Outlast this guy once, you have what is effectively a 4 mana 3/2 first strike, which is great. 3.0. Alabaster Kieran. So I've talked about this card many times. You're paying 1 extra mana for Vigilance and an extra Toughness on your flyer. This is very important if you don't have a lot of flyers. This card goes up in value. If you do have a lot of flyers, this card is still okay. 2/5. Okay, 2.0. I would say this card goes up to a 2/5 if you need ways to deal with flyers, though. Brave the Sands, 0.000, maybe even negatives. This card is awful. It's going to lose you a card. These abilities aren't good. Ugh. Dazzling Ramparts. Now I've been considering the value of this card a lot. 5 mana for a 0/7 defender is something I wouldn't play. In defensive decks, what this does is it blocks or it deals with a bomb. It doesn't do both because you have to tap the bomb before they attack, so you can't block with this. So there's a bit of counter synergy with this card. I would say in your sealed pool especially, if you are running low on, if you just have a low count of removal and ways to deal with bombs, I'll play this card. But if you don't need this tap ability, or if your deck is aggressive, this card is just really bad. For these reasons, I would say it's either 1.5 or a 2.0, probably a 1.5, but sometimes you need to play it to just deal with bombs, but most of the time it shouldn't make the cut. Yep, pretty much just what I said. Defiant Strike. This is a better card in Jeskai decks because +1/+0 and draw a card isn't good if you're not getting prowess off. Well, it isn't terrible, but it isn't good unless you're getting prowess off. +2/+1 and draw a card is much better, especially at 1 mana. And activating prowess on all your guys. If you aren't running prowess, this is fringe playable, but not very good to play. Most of the times it won't make the cut in my decks that just don't have prowess, but usually I have like 1 or 2 guys with prowess and I just stick this in. I would say it's a 2.0, but it goes up in value in prowess decks. It goes up to about a 2.5. Doesn't do a ton itself, yeah. It's a good vehicle to trigger prowess, making it much stronger in the Jeskai deck. Yep. You know, just what I said. End hostilities. Wrath effects, even at 5. Like, at 5, it's easier to read. However, in limited, it's less relevant than it is in constructed, where it's much easier to read this at 5. Wrath effects are powerful. This is cheaper than the other one, which is Dune Blast, which is something to note. If you're behind, you reset the board and start playing from there. If it's a tie, then you draw threats. When their board gets much better than yours, you drop this, drop your threats, and they just have nothing. I would say this is a 4.0, but it's verging on the lower end of 4.0. Okay, he's not a big fan of Wraths Unlimited. Yep. Makes up for a slow start, destroys opponents that overcommit. If your opponent sneak bestow cards into the draft, it deals with that. Fair enough. 5 slow enough, that's not too suspicious. Yep. Once your opponent knows about it, it does lose some value because they start playing around it. Aggressive decks, yeah, they shouldn't run this because the times that it's going to be a tie or you're going to be behind are much lower than in controlling decks or mid-range decks. So I suppose that could lower it down a little bit. But don't underestimate this. Erase, purely a sideboard card. If you see Ascendancies, maybe sided in. 0.5 or maybe a 1.0. 1.0. Feed of Resistance absolutely is making my top 5 commons. It's definitely in the top 3. This card is absolutely insane. Every single board I've seen, every single turn I've seen, this card would just be a very big blowout if they had it, and if you do have it, it always just is. It protects against removal while making your creature bigger permanently. It has some synergies in the Abzan Guild, but any deck running white is super happy to have this. And an Abzan is just insane. This is a 3/5. Absolutely. I don't care what he says here. This is a 3/5. This is one of the best ways to use a non-creature, non-removal space. You can even take out a removal that's mediocre for this. This card is great. I'm not revoking my 3/5. 0.0, never ever playing a 1-mana 1/1, and the effect is so costly and doesn't give you anything. This doesn't even belong in the sideboard. This belongs in like the trash bin. Herald of Anafenza. Talked a little bit in depth about this card. 1-mana 1/2 is not great, and the Outlast cost is pretty expensive, but this additional putting warrior tokens in helps enable raid, and helps you be able to afford to tap this guy to outlast him at his high outlast cost. It'll take him a very long time to ramp up into 3/4 and 4/5, which is where he starts to get good, so he's a very, very slow card, but he should be pretty good. I'm going to give him a 3/0. Yep, Inherent Synergy, activates Raid, has Outlast. Puts in warrior tokens too. High Sentinels. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. 4 mana for a 3/4 flyer is already great. Stop there. I'm very happy playing this card. Past that, he gets a +1/+1 for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Woohoo! If you're playing Abzan, this gets even bigger. Like, without having to do anything, this gets even bigger. Just outlasting your guys, which you're doing anyway. And if that wasn't enough of a good card, he gets to enable himself. By paying 4, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, making him bigger as well as another creature bigger. This is a bomb in every deck pretty much, since he enables himself. Even if this ability is a little expensive, the effect of getting +2/+2 on the board is really powerful. Just, you can hold up instants, and if you don't cast those instants, do this. You do that at the end of their turn. It's a very great mana sink in the later points of the game. I'm giving this guy a 4/0. And definitely a 4/0. Yep, baseline 3/4 flyer for 4. And can grow your other guy's instant speed, grows itself in reward. Yep, very, very true. Jeskai student. A lot of decks in Jeskai are naturally aggressive, but this is a very, very decent defensive creature if your deck is slow or mid-range. This guy will make the cut most of the time. If your deck is aggressive, this guy won't make the cut, just because needing to have a trick to make him 2 power is just not where you want to be in aggressive decks. Overall, I'll give him a 2/0. Okay. Yeah, prowess is an interesting mechanic in that it does a lot of work while doing nothing. That's absolutely true. Your opponent playing around prowess is something that they'll have to do. Even if your hand is like lands and creatures, your opponent will be like, well, if he has a spell in this situation, what does this do for me? So, in this is like one of the most true lines I've ever seen. Yeah, your opponents often have to respect the potential of prowess while you have mana up, making different plays than they otherwise would. Yep, not knowing if you even have anything. That's also true. This does only attack for 1. So yeah, as I just said, decent defensive card, not a player in aggressive decks. Kill Shot. This is probably my #1 common. It's just good removal at a low cost and instant speed. This is a 3/5. 2/5. Three mana is beginning to get a little obvious, and it's pretty easy to be like, I have to play around Kill Shot at common. It's a little awkward with Outlast creatures. In the mid game, it's less awkward with Outlast creatures because you can afford to Outlast and Kill Shot. But it does kind of telegraph it. Rewards you for being defensive. Yeah, aggressive decks won't really play it. But I really think this is very, very solid removal at common. I would lower it to a 3/0 based on the things he said, which are very true. Mardu Hateblade. Don't be fooled, this is not a white card, this is a white-black card. You're never playing this if black is your splash, or if you're just not playing black. But in a white-black deck, this guy is good in defensive decks, not good in aggressive decks, which is true for a lot of white. If you look at it so far, white is a very defensive sort of style, which fits in right well with Abzan. But if you're playing a defensive deck, this guy should be fine. He's a slower Typhoid Rats or Sedge Scorpion or whatever you want to say. So the 1/1 with Death Touch for 1. But leaving up 1 mana isn't very hard to do. So in white-black decks, if you're defensive, this guy should be fine. Say 2/0. Got it? Yep. Mardu Horde Chief. I really want to know. I want to play this card more. 3 mana, 2/3. Already good. Especially in a format with a lot of morph at 3. Raid for incremental value, getting a 1/1, so that's like 3 power for 3 mana, and it's a 2/3 and a 1/1. He helps enable future raid. It's a warrior token, so this is 2 warriors, which I found to be a little relevant with like the chiefs, especially Chief of the Edge. Making this a 3/3 and your token a 2/1 makes this especially great, but this is good by itself. I would say it's a 2 though. Just consistently it'll be a 3 mana 2/3, and that's playable but not exciting. 2/5. Okay, yeah, 3/0. I can see this. Yep, 2 warriors. Your creature light, yeah. Yeah. Like, honestly, I am impressed by this card, so I'm not too surprised that he gave it a 3/0. Master of Pearls. This is like the definition of a 3/5 in my book. It can come down early as a bear, which isn't great, but it's something to consider. If you have a few guys, or if you know your deck's going to be very mid-range, you can morph this guy, flip him up, and blow out a combat pretty well. But this isn't a bomb on its own, but it's very powerful. So things that aren't bombs but are very powerful are pretty much always 3/5s. Ooh, 4/0. It's hard to play around. Okay. I'm still giving it a 3-5. I don't think it's at the level of some of the 4-0s. Like Thousand Winds in blue was a 4-0. I'd rather have Thousand Winds than this guy. Rush of Battle, this card is awful. I don't even need to like say, oh, I looked at the rating. This is a sorcery. Even if you have a lot of warriors, this effect just isn't good enough. I have 4 mana as a sorcery. Awful. I wouldn't even say this shines in a warrior deck. Yeah, Sanctified Charge did kind of spoil us. First Strike is much better than Lifelink. Sage Eye Harrier, in terms of what he's been talking about with some of the morph guys and how they can soak up damage removal, that is no different for this card. It's a warrior, which is something to note with like, this is a player in decks that run Raider Spoils. Like, this is a consideration for it since it has flying and is a warrior. He can get through some cards. So it does have some synergies with this subtype warrior. A flip up cost of 4 means that you can start playing this guy on flying defense on turn 4 until turn like 9. This will always be able to block something and just get you into the late points of the game. So in a controlling deck, this is like a 3-0. In an aggressive deck, this is like a 1-5. But considering that you're mostly evaluating this card on its ability to be good in defensive decks, it doesn't really trade off anything. It doesn't eat anything, but it blocks for days. So I'm going to say this is a 3-0. 2-0? Geez, that's a little lower than I expected. Yeah, it's true that this isn't really a powerful morph card, though. Like, it isn't flipping up and getting through a lot of damage ever. Its highest power rating is when it's morphed down. And playing cards like this also helps make cards like Cancel harder to play, because if they cancel a Sage Eye Harrier, you're never really upset. Okay. I think in defensive decks this would go up to a 2-5, but Salt Road Patrol, 4 mana for a 2-5. I did a Jeskai draft, I think, and I played against an Abzan deck, and this was really annoying. Coming down turn 5, just like saying, oh, I have a blocker, and guess what? I can give it +1/+1 counters, give it some synergies, like Death Touch, Reach, First Strike, Lifelink, and Flying, I think are all of them, and this one does great with all of them. Just one counter with any of those abilities is great. So past the synergies, a 4 mana 2/5, it's already pretty good, especially in defensive, and he helps encourage that defensive with his Outlast. So 2/5. Yeah, this is a serviceable card even without Outlast. Seeker of the Way? Yes, I love this card. 2 mana for a 2/2 with Prowess is already good. Giving it lifelink in addition when you play a trick that may like make him bigger already. Well, it will make him bigger already because he has Prowess. So you just play it like an irrelevant combat trick. Let's say you attack with him, they don't block, and you play like Defiant Strike. Just +1/+0 and draw a card. You swing in for 4, it's suddenly lifelink, so you do an 8-point life swing, which is great in races, but still pretty good just in general. And then you draw a card because of Defiant Strike. So this guy, with the right support, is just amazing. Like, the threat of having your 2 mana 2/2 just be a 3/3 at any point if you play a spell at all is great. Great value. It's almost just like a cheaper Hill Giant. 3.0. Yep. Siegecraft. Given how much removal there is, and how little this card does, I'm never playing it. 1.0. You can build your own pillar field box. Oh, sorry, that wasn't actually that funny, but I'm a little tired. Smite the Monstrous. Slower formats encourage the power of this card, as it won't be dead in your hand, and as the game goes later, killing high power creatures is important. That said, if you're playing against an aggressive deck, this can sometimes get awkward. Mardu decks have a lot of creatures, and this won't even hit any of them. But this should be solid. If Killshot got a 2/5 for its flaws, it is harder to read this. I'll say it's a 3/0 though. Cool. Suspension Field. This card is great. Playing it every time. Playing all of them every time. Toughness 3 or greater is even easier of a player. It's even easier to get this off than Smite the Monstrous, and it costs less. It's an enchantment, so if they kill the enchantment, they get their guy back, but let's be honest, who's really playing main deck enchantment removal? And even games 2 and 3 after they've seen this, their enchantment removal can just be dead. This isn't really the biggest consideration deciding an enchantment removal. 3/5. Yeah, Journey to Nowhere was too good. Take Up Arms. Instant speed 3/1/1 warrior tokens. So if you have Chief of the Edge, a card like this goes up a lot because you're paying 5 mana for 6 power. A lot. That makes this card turn to great. 5 mana for a surprise 3/3. Though, just as a card, it's a little slow, and the bodies aren't that great at attacking, so this is a more control-oriented card, since you're not attacking with 1/1s a lot of the time and gaining profit. That said, it should be able to 1-for-1 in the later points of the game, but it's not great at doing that. Excluding the synergies that you can get with Chief of the Edge specifically, I would say this card would be somewhere between a 2/0 and a 2/5, given that with Chief of the Edge this card is insane, and in a controlling deck it gets a little better to just surprise them. I would say this is a 2/5. Timely Hordemate. This is an overrated card for a lot of people. 3/2 body for 4 is something I'm not happy about. There's so many 2 power guys from the 2-drops that you're playing because Morph is in the format to get through damage, to the Morph creatures that just trade with this if they want to. Yeah, as a 4 mana 3/2 I wouldn't be happy playing it. Past that, the raid, I'd have to know what creatures I had with power 2 or less, and how relevant they were in the mid-game / late game, because this guy isn't coming down until the mid-game / late game. That said, if you have cards like Ruthless Ripper that are fantastic in the mid and late game, or some creatures that are just very, very solid at all points in the game, like Seeker of the Way, this card goes up in value quite a bit, but I would say 2/0. Yeah, naturally in a set I would say 3-0, but you know, the body's awkward. Oh my god, the new Bloodbraid Elf. Don't even go there. It's a little bit of a consideration that you can attack with a guy and where they block, and if you trade off, then you can just get your guy back and be like, haha. However, if you just attack with a low power guy that you would bring back with this, sometimes they can just eat it, and then you don't get value for that. Yeah, this is a really, really extreme exaggeration. But if you have like a Ruthless Ripper and a Seeker of the Way, this card can go up to a 3.0 in my opinion. Venerable Lamassu. Despite being on curve for a flyer, 7 mana is what you expect to pay for a 5 power flyer. And in a slow format, this might be a little more reasonable. However, the fact that a 7 drop that doesn't do anything besides give you just like a big flyer means this card isn't great, and I found it not making my cut most of the time. I would say either 1-5 or 2-0. Yep. War Behemoth. This has impressed me a bit in slower decks, and well, yeah, in slower decks and mid-range decks. This guy flips up for 5. 3/6 is very hard to remove or attack into, and it's just pretty efficiently costed. And in late game, you can just drop it for 6. Somewhere between 2-5 and 3-0. Yep, solid stats, versatile cost. Yeah. Watcher of the Roost. 3 mana, 2/1 flyer is already good. The upside of surprising them with a flying defender, surprising them with a flying attacker, and randomly just gaining 2 life, which is okay. This guy is pretty good at racing, and he's pretty good at just surprising your opponent. The free flip is nice to consider too. I would give this guy a 3-0. Yep. Wingmate Rock. Oh god, I love this card. Ever since they first spoiled it. 5 mana for a 3/4 flyer is already efficiently costed, so stop there. I'm already playing this card most of the time. Raid, you get another 3/4 flyer. So you're telling me I get 2 3/4 flyers for 5 mana. I get 2 bodies for what I would pay one of those bodies for. Jeez. This is one of the few cards where you can suicide a creature and still gain value because this raid effect is just that strong. And in addition, this last line isn't irrelevant either, because 2 3/4 flyers, you're going to start attacking them with them. And when you're attacking them with them, you're making it just a little harder for them to kill you. So 4.5. This card is amazing. Amazing. I could see him giving it a 4.0 just because if you can't attack, it's like a 3/4 flying for 5, but you can always attack if you're getting a 3/4 for it. Yep. Oh, top 5 commons. Alright. Smite the Monstrous is probably there. Core Chief is probably there. Killshot's there. So that's 3 of them. Feet of Resistance is there. It's 4. And Anok Bondkin. Okay, the order I'd put these in personally. So, sorry, I'll take the notepad here. The order I would put these in, personally, I would put Feat of Resistance on top. It's probably not how it is, but this card has been insane. And just, you have to play around it. But when you do, it gets a little worse. But it's so hard to play around. Yeah, I'm very fine putting that at number 1. It's great in aggressive and controlling decks. Just great. Number 2, this is pretty hard, by the way. These are all really strong cards. I would give to Killshot, personally. I'm playing a lot of slow decks in this format, and Killshot is just great removal for those decks. Even if it's easy to read, it isn't that easy to read. If it costed 4, I would put it lower. You know what? Not gonna give it the second slot, but I'm considering it. I'll give the next slot to Bondkin. This guy's great. He's efficiently costed. Get the Outlast once. He's great by himself. You have multiple guys, you can just do ridiculous stuff, especially with like Feat of Resistance, that you can do some insane combats. Number 3, I'll give to Smite the Monstrous. It's harder to read than Killshot, and it should hit everything you want it to hit. In a slow format, there will be cards. The relevance of this not getting played sometimes won't be pretty much ever, and it's just a very solid removal card. I'm giving Killshot the 4th place. It certainly wouldn't get the 4th place for a lot of decks, but most decks I would give it the 4th place. In last place I'd give Mardu Horde Chief. This guy is very good, but there's sometimes where it's a 3 mana 2/3 and that just doesn't compare really to the rest of these cards. But it definitely deserves its spot. Alright, let's see how I did. Anok Bondkin was number 1. So I was off by 1 here. I can see this being the best common. It's just self-fueling, makes a lot of cards great. So LSV's rating. So one thing to note, I got all 5 cards right. I don't think it was very hard to get them right. The order, I'm just such a fanboy of Feat of Resistance. Anok Bondkin being number 1, I accept. Number 2, he has Mardu Horde Chief. I put it at number 5. The thing is, even when this card is at its worst, it's still a 3 mana 2/3, which is pretty good. I just don't think it's as good as the other cards, though, in those instances. If your deck has some warrior synergies, like Chief of the Scale and Chief of the Edge, this card does get pretty insane pretty quickly, though. But I'm going to keep this at number 5. I will change these two, though, and get my new list based on what I've heard from him and seen from him. Number 3, he put Smite the Monstrous. We have that at the same level. I think it is definitely the number 3 slot, regardless of how you look at it. Number 4, he put Feat. I put Feat at number 2. And I put Killshot at number 4 instead of number 5. I don't know, I just like Killshot. I think initially when people aren't used to the set, they'll walk into this a lot, especially at lower levels of play. Um, this might even rocket up to number one against players that haven't seen this format and players who just don't play around cards. This will become insane. As players get better and better, they'll get better and better at playing around kill shot, so at more competitive levels, I'll agree that this would make the number 5 slot. Alright, that's it for Mardu and White. I think I did a pretty great job with this one. Definitely was more accurate with my ratings, but I think Blue would be my most inaccurate comparison to LSV because of the way he natures certain cards and the way he likes to play decks versus the way I think will be more consistent. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and you all have a great day.